I had the pleasure of talking to my great-granduncle back in Thanksgiving, and, as is the usual interest, I asked him if he knew any old town legends from before my generation was alive. He was alive before Puerto Rico became a commonwealth and before Americanization took root. And the scary fact of the matter is one of the stories he told I actually experienced, which is the legend I will be telling you. After telling the legend, I will give you my personal experiences related to it. Legend tells that when the sun dies down over the horizon, when the cerulean sky turns a black ebony, and the late night mist rolls over the hillsides, that one should not wander too far from their home, or go outside when you live in the rural wilds. For at late hours, when all are meant to be asleep, ghostly howling can be heard in the hills and woods late at night. Many do not attribute this to normal dogs or wolves, because wolves do not exist on this island, and dogs do not howl so mournfully or ghostly as these skin-crawling and blood-curdling echoes. If you hear these howls, be they far or near, know that outside could be Los Perros de las Cruces. In English, it translates to Black Hounds of the Crosses, a pack of ghostly, demonic hounds with glowing yellow and fiery eyes that around their necks drag along heavy, rusted, and broken chains. They are said to have been the faithful hounds of a shepherd who had died of the Black Death when it ravaged the island some centuries ago. When they laid him in his grave, the hounds were chained to the trees at the edge of the cemeteries and were never allowed off the chain. They constantly pulled and pulled, trying to visit their master and releasing unholy and mournful howls all day and all night non-stop. It would keep the surrounding countryside up easily, and this situation continued until one day when the howling stopped and the townsfolk that went to see what was wrong found an eerie sight. Their chains were all found snapped, but the dogs were found dead on the shepherd's grave. Though they were gone, the howling continued soon after their deaths. Every night, those who drove by the cemetery could see black hounds staring back at them from the cemetery gates. And this continued for over a century, until one day the town was expanding, and to make room for the residential areas, the bodies in the cemetery were moved to a new site and marked with simple stones high in the mountains where they would not be disturbed. It is said that in moving the bodies, the hounds lost their master, and every night they prowled the countryside, searching for the shepherd's lost grave, howling in pain, loss, and rabid anger for those who wander alone at night. They prowl near churchyards, graveyards, and bridges, as well as some say they attack the evil-hearted who possess too much malice. The only trace they leave are footprints burned into the ground, or wherever they touch, reeking of incense and sometimes sulfur. A good way to ward them off, supposedly, is to place a stick by the door. This resembles the cane of a shepherd and is likely to make the hounds keep quiet and stay away. But make no mistake, at night, when you hear those howls haunt the town of Waco like banshees wailing their grief into the late hours of the night, make no mistake that they are near, ever searching for their lost master and prowling in the shadows of the evening, seeking whomever to devour. I did not know of this story until my great-granduncle told me of it, but years before, I had experienced firsthand the Black Hounds of the Crosses. I live in a remote house deep in my own neck of the woods, where trees are so high and dense that moonlight can't even hope to peer through at night. I was alone at home that deceptively peaceful evening. My mother had gone to take my brother to basketball practice, and I refused to go because I did not like sports, and so I just stayed, doing my homework. The night was quiet. Not a single cricket could be heard, and the wind itself grew deathly still. It was an all-encompassing silence that I would have described as too quiet. The kind of quiet that was reserved for a graveyard or a funeral. I felt uneasy, though tried to distract myself from the gut feeling of something being completely off by getting back to my homework. My stomach went into knots despite how hard I tried to ignore it and keep working. And eventually, I finished all of my homework and was going to take a bath and go to sleep afterward. But that's when I heard it. A howl. There was just one at first, unearthly in tone. Then came many, many more. Like no dogs I'd ever heard, the echoing pierced my very soul in blood-curdling fashion. I could hear much more movement outside, and the rattling of rusty and old chains hitting the ground at high speed. Curiosity beckoned me, and so I steeled myself for but a moment, in order to do something I would later regret for much time afterward. I edged my way to the front door, and, hesitantly, I cracked it open, before I looked outside. That's when I saw it. Glowing yellow eyes, and I heard the sound of rattling chains. A hound lunged violently at my door, which, thank goodness, was made of solid steel. I woke from my momentary daze, brought on by my surprise, and shut the door immediately. I then ran as fast as I could to lock all of my doors. Then I grabbed a bat from my storage room at the back of my house, and was then on my guard. I shuddered, and tried to lay as still as possible so as not to be heard, when the beast suddenly started tackling the doors and walls of my house, an action not shared by any dog or canine I have ever seen. The bangs, howls, and rattling was so loud I covered my ears because it caused me so much discomfort, and I just prayed for it to all be over. Slowly, ever so slowly, the tackling stopped, but the rattling and howling was still present. After a bit, I heard the howling move very far away, but still audible. I saw a light pull up by my house. My mom had arrived, and I ran out and pushed her and my brother inside as fast as I could, and explained all the events that occurred earlier that evening. They thought I had a vivid imagination, and that I was just really stressed out, but I still locked the doors and called the police in a panic. Only, after the next couple of hours, when the police arrived, did my mother actually believe my story. For around the house, in enormous sizes, they found dog tracks around the perimeter, and dents in the doors covered with claw marks and teeth indentations. But they did not smell of mud or dirt or anything a normal dog would. When you got close to the tracks or the marks on the doors, it was found that they smelled strongly of ash and sage incense.